back to my series on patching the PolyKrell. And there we're listening to both teleharmonic modules, both of them in shift register mode, and both of them being controlled like a paraphonic voice from our quadracs, from channel 2 and channel 3 of our quadracs respectively. And those two voices are headed into the Linux VCA, and then from the Linux VCA they head into the Korgasmatron 12 volt per octave low pass filter, and then on out, and you can hear that low pass filter opening up. So the low pass filter and the Linux VCA are what's tracking the voltages coming out of quadracs, and that's what gives us our Krell envelopes. Now I chose to go into the VCA first before hitting the filter so that I could use that gain coming out of the VCA to drive the filter just a tiny little bit. I really like the Korgasmatron filter for this purpose because it can be very clean, and it gives you an input that you can use to set its gain. That's the Korgasmatron here. So I've got one of the teleharmonics coming in one side and the other teleharmonic coming in to the other side. And I've got the gain down fairly low. I'm using the Linux VCA to derive that gain, but I'm not driving it into distortion. And obviously I could do that, but in this case, because I'm patching in chords and because those chords can be quite disharmonious, I don't want too much distortion coming out of it, and it's pretty easy to clip a filter and to get some pretty nasty sounds out of it if you're sending more than just a single frequency or octaves or something rather simple. As soon as you get into these complex waveforms that are made of harmonies and you're setting up a paraphonic patch, I find that it's good to be careful about what filter I'm using. But this is also nice because I get the same sounding, very similar sound on both sides. So in the future I'm going to be able to use these two voices panned out in stereo to create our stereo mix and to have one of these Krell chords on either side. What's interesting about that is that in a lot of cases, because both the teleharmonics are getting their frequency, their pitch CV from the same quantizer output, there's a good chance that some of the notes that they pick will be the same. But in an effort to ensure that they're not all exactly the same, what I've done is I've set up their clocking to be different on each one. And I did that in two different ways. Number one, I'm using the end of fall from each of the Krell channels, channel 2 and channel 3, and then modifying them with my dope for trigger modifier. So because those two Krell envelopes are running free function, so they're basically just running on their own. I have them set up in a very similar way in terms of the rise and fall time and the shape of them, but they're actually free running, doing their own thing. So they're sending out their own end of fall gates, And then that pretty much guarantees that a lot of the time they're not in sync, so that both of my telharmonics won't always be grabbing exactly the same notes. But we'll see when I show you some of the other parts that I've added to the patch, how sometimes it can be useful to have them track similar notes so that we can get the polyphony to match and then break apart as a useful musical structure. But I did do one thing to keep these two inner voices somewhat cohesive, and you can see that by watching the red and green traces on the scope. What I've done is, and if I go into CV mode, so now I'm on CV mode on channel 2, we can see that I've got a red inverted mode for my rise, and I've got a red inverted mode for my fall. But if we take a look at the CV on channel 3, I've got a green non-inverted mode on rise and green non-inverted mode on fall. So I'm using the same two LFOs to control these two Krell functions, but I've got them controlling it inversely. And then that almost guarantees that when one of the Krell functions speeds up, the other one is running slow, and then when that one speeds up, the first one is running slow. And you can see that by watching the scope. They kind of take turns chasing each other. One is down and then one is up, so that in stereo, when I pan my two telharmonics out in the mix, what I'm going to get is separate articulations in the left and the right hand speaker, which can be helpful in a big fat mix like this where there's lots going on. I hope that you've enjoyed our series on patching the PolyKrell. It's nice to hear now that we're starting to get some polyphony into the patch. Next time around, we're going to explore more different ways that I can create polyphony, and we'll have a look at how the melody ties into the timing of these different voices. Please take some time to join my Patreon. It helps me to make some more music and some more videos. And we'll see you next time.